who, how do you identify the grasp for power? What's the indicator that someone's in a virtual space with virtual beings? What's the indicator that that person wants power over somebody else?
I mean, just how to put this. I think people are always looking for a sort of technological solution for these sorts of things, when the way that we have always solved these sorts of problems is like healthy, sustainable, functional social structures made of people maintaining those. Like, almost every single behavioral problem online relates to a lack of moderation and a platform, a communication medium that has been constructed either like accidentally to have poor moderation, or more often than not, quite intentionally to have none. And this is what differentiates them from physical spaces. Like, you walk into a bar and start just screaming at random people, you're going to find your face meeting the concrete outside very rapidly, because
Rightfully so.
physical space, like there are people empowered via their hands to be able to eject you from that space. And yet we continue to create many digital spaces wherein no one has that capability. And so they become violently anarchic at any, this is the number, one of the big problems with the Steam forums is that, like, it's foisted upon every developer to have one, and there are very poor tools to track and moderate behavior. And so people are just sort of left to the woods. It's nice that Valve literally installed a button now that I think you only see if you're logged in as someone who has rights. That's literally a "I need help" button. If you're an owner of the game, like, that's indicative of, like, the fact that the button is needed at all.
Exactly, that's my
the entirety of the structure failed, and that was the best idea anyone had. And I think anyone who's run or participated in running a Discord knows all of this kind of thing to be true. So I think what's the best thing VR can do, in addressing these sorts of things, is trying to ask the question, how can I make pro-social spaces from the get-go that empower the individuals who run those spaces to communicate what is essential in terms of people, what rules people have to abide by, tracking, who, if people have come in as bad actors in the past, being able to restrict their future access, various sorts of trust. I think VR chat, from what I've seen, I mean, I'm not an expert on it at all, but from the bits and pieces I've seen, they seem to do that very well and seem to be very responsive to that. But I think that's the core challenge, more than any other piece of the technology, and more than any other sort of, like, oh, I'm in VR, so I think and act differently. I think all of that is secondary to creating tools that empower people to build social groups that they can feel safe in.
You probably saw it recently. I'm apologize. I don't know her name, but there was a woman who had a very poor experience, I believe, in Poker Stars recently. And that kind of went all around Twitter, that she was feeling very threatened, had a bad time. Unfortunately, some people in the VR community did not respond to that the correct way, and we went into the blaming. And I don't know her name, but I feel terrible that she had that experience, and her experience is completely valid, and we can do better. I always ask the question when that comes up, is who's the number one person, or not person, entity that's setting up those tools? Is it going to be on the developers first? Is it going to be on the platform heads? Like, if it's an Oculus title, is it up to Facebook to do better, or are developers really the forefront of this? In my mind, it's the developers to provide the tools to the end user.
I mean, if they're a platform that's like, if you're a platform, then you provide value to the developers who are on your platform. So if it's the sort of thing that a platform can do better, or provide resources, especially to small developers, then that's something the platform should offer. It's like, it's in the same way that, like, on Steam, like, oh, I can have some leaderboards up there. Like, I think there should absolutely be some sort of, like, especially bluntly put, like, fucking, if they're gonna take 30%, you know what I mean? Like, I need moderation help more than I need trading cards to go with my game. And it would be nice to see platforms think about like, oh, what are some things that we can provide, sort of globally that help with user issues. I mean, this has been something, to my knowledge, that you see in the console space. Clearly, like individual console developers don't have to deal with someone is being abusive through Xbox Live. Xbox Live handles that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think despite the fact that obviously there are privacy concerns, especially when you attach real accounts to things, I think if we're thinking on a theoretical basis of at least of it done well, that's something a platform could provide. Considering that Facebook can't even do like basic support correctly for their devices, I wouldn't think they would handle user moderation well. They seem to be trying to handle that more and more with algorithms on their primary platform. So that's probably just going to go poorly.
Is tying your real identity to your account, like Facebook is attempting, putting aside their inadequacies on how they've handled it, but is that step, if someone did it right and could handle that, is tying your real life identity to your virtual profile a good moderation tool in your mind? Real world consequences for what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference is whether or not that's exposed publicly. Like, do I think you should have to like attach a credit card or something like that to something like that? Probably, to prevent scammers primarily from being able to just regenerate new accounts. Should I have to be able to present myself as Anton Hand to be in multi-user digital environments? I flatly reject that sort of requirement, and I think of it as being tyrannical, and it primarily to the benefit of the platform holder, because they want to keep, which is funny because in many ways, like my understanding of all the sort of modern metric stuff that both Facebook and Google run on is based on like shadow profiles. So even the necessity of having that sort of like publicly tied identity isn't really necessary for their data acquisition. So it only comes across as just a control mechanism, to my mind.
I'm with you. But is that control mechanism ultimately a value add if it helps moderation?
I mean, it clearly hasn't helped the tenor of anything on Facebook be good. So there's no reason to assume, oh, it's tied to their like all the worst people on Facebook are perfectly fucking fine with you knowing exactly who they are while they say what they say. So,
but then are we discrediting, just as a talking point, kind of high concept, are we discrediting the difference between the Facebook as a social media entity where it's words on a page versus you as a VR avatar with your real life identified to it? It's, if we say VR is immersive and different, I act differently behind a keyboard than I do as a VR avatar. Let's just be real. I do. I'm going to be much more okay. Now, I don't say shit. I don't even use Facebook. But I am going to be much more open to saying shit through text than I am as a virtual avatar face-to-face with another avatar. So is the real-life identification connected to a virtual avatar different? And will that moderate differently than just behind a keyboard?
I don't know if I can generalize that. Like, I think people are super different about that, just because the way that people conceptualize an avatar in a digital space is so different based on raising, on age, on video game literacy, etc. Like, I would deeply hazard to assume that it's generally one way or the other with, people in general. I think you'd have to get pretty fine in terms of demographics to get constancy in that comparison.
Hit that subscribe button to stay on top of the daily clips, or catch the debates and fireside chats live on the main channel down in the video description. See you next time, Space Cowboys.